Hey everybody, this is Everyday Commentary, and this is a video on this device. The axis lock, the sliding bar lock, the XR lock, whatever you want to call it. The principle is the same. You have a bar that passes through the knife at the pivot point, and the shape of the tang matches up so that the bar wedges the knife open between this static pillar and the bar itself. So boom. And the way that this works is that there's a spring that wants to drive the bar forward, and it's usually gripped on both sides so that there's two springs, one on each side of the handle, and it pushes the bar forward. You pull this back and it's under spring tension and it goes out of the way, allowing you to get the otherwise jammed up knife blade out and closed. So before you are an older generation of the axis lock, the sliding bar lock as implemented by James brand, the XR lock, which is very similar, implemented by SOG, sliding bar lock by Gerber, and then a new generation of the sliding bar lock or axis lock on the 945. So let's talk a little bit about why this lock is so good. And first of all, it's ambidextrous. So if you have a left-handed user or a right-handed user, you make one knife and it can be opened and closed by both persons, no problem. The only thing you have to do is you have to make sure that the opening device, the opening method, the deployment method, and the clip are ambidextrous as well. And then you have a fully ambidextrous knife. So that's a big advantage because it means that you can make a knife, one knife for all different kinds of people, and you don't have to worry about, oh, will this left-handed knife sell, or what are we gonna do with left-handed people? You just have one knife and it works for both. So that's a big deal. Other thing that I like about the sliding bar lock design is that your fingers don't have to pass in the blade path. So for example, if you compare that to something like this knife, which is a frame lock, when you close the knife, you disengage the lock and your fingers are in the blade path. And if you're not careful, you can nick your finger. That happens every once in a while. It's not a big deal, but why bother if you don't have to? And that's why, one other reason why I like the sliding bar locks, because your fingers are out of the way. The final thing that I like about the sliding bar lock, it's pretty intuitive, especially in something like this design, where you can see that the grip is very directional. Having it as a circle, not quite as visually informative. Here, there's no other way for it to go. It's gonna go that way. And so it's very easy to use. It's almost like a lockback. There's no fidgeting. You don't have to like dig your fingers into something like this. You have to like kind of dig into the blade well, which not ideal. Okay, but here's the problem. In the first generation or the early generations of the axis lock, you had a sort of give and take. You could either have good quick deployment or you could have solid lockup. And I've tuned this over many tries, and this is about as good as it's gonna get. There's no blade play and it's decently smooth, but it's not lightning fast. It'll stop there and you can't really pop it open. Now, the patent on the axis lock expired in either 2017 or 2018. Patents are for 25 years, but in practice, they're for about 17 years because of how long the process takes to get a patent. So after the patent expired, the patent was for a father and a stepson out of Rhode Island who developed it, McHenry and Williams. So once the patent expired, lots of people could make sliding bar locks. And to be fair, lots of companies made them before the patent expired. They made them slightly different and just avoided the patent fight. But the reality is, now we have this generation of sliding bar locks that are both fast to deploy and have good lockup. And that's because the machining on the rear of the tang and the machining on the lock itself, the lock interface with this static pillar, they've gotten much better. And so you don't really have to worry about whether or not the lockup is going to be there. The lockup's just there. You know, there's still not the fastest locks in the entire, or fastest knives in the entire world, even in this iteration, which is really quite fast. Because there's friction or pressure placed on the lock bar by the, or placed on the rear tang of the blade the entire way through the blade path opening. So there's something touching or rubbing up against it. Whereas like on a frame lock, once the detent is kicked open, there's no contact between the blade and the lock. And so it comes out pretty fast. So, you know, even in one of the faster iterations, which is this one, I really like this knife, by the way, it's super duper fast, but it's still not quite as fast as the other designs. And so, as you can see, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. The Gerber one is huge, huge. If you look at it, I mean, the little bar sticks out really wide. It's very, very large. I mean, you can see in comparison to like the Benchmade mini grip. The other thing is it's way, in the mini grip, it's way down in there, and the Gerber, it's much closer to the spine of the knife. And this one is very much like the old Benchmades. There's an itty bitty amount of blade play, side to side blade play, but it's pretty smooth as it is. And so that leads me to what I think is the best version of this, which is either this one or the most recent version of the Axis lock by Benchmade. And here, this is on the 945, which I think is probably now my very favorite Benchmade. And it is absolutely rock solid, up, down, side to side, no blade play whatsoever, and it fires like a rocket. And you could see this on earlier knives than this one. You can see it on like the Bugout was the first knife that I noticed where the lock was much, much faster and very little blade play. And then I saw it on the Freak, the Mini Freak, and the Mini Bugout. So I knew that they were making the Axis lock a little bit better in terms of tolerances. There's a couple other things that are interesting about it. For example, here you can see that here the lock, the bar size is smaller still. This is the mini 940. This is the mini grip. They're ostensibly the same size knife, but they've made the bar a little bit smaller. And I'm not sure if that has something to do with it. I mean, it obviously would make the point of contact smaller, but it's definitely noticeably smaller. You can see that the outside is not that different. In fact, it looks like this one might be a little bigger, but the bar itself is a little smaller. The other thing is the spring on action on this one is much more consistent. If you really play with it, you can get this to kind of torque out. I mean, so you can see it's like moving just a little bit side, like it's pivoting like this inside the channel. This one you can get, I can't get any sort of wiggle one way or the other. It's just staying right there. I mean, maybe just a little hair bit of wiggle. And that again tells you that the tolerances on the whole mechanism are better. The other thing that I like about how they've implemented it now as opposed to before is that the geometry on the back of the knife, let's see if I can hold that right there. Get that one out. And you can see that this looks a lot flatter than this one. And there is a line on this one. That's just where the lock bar is built up over time. So not a big deal, but it does make it so that the it looks like there's a line, like a groove, but it's not. Here, what it is the rear tang is a little bit sloped like this. On this one, it looks like the rear tang is a little bit flatter. And that could just be the blade geometry, or it could just be that it's the way that this particular 945 is designed. But either way, it makes for a much smoother lockup, or a much smoother deployment, and a much surer lockup. So I like that a lot. I really do like that a lot. In terms of the overall design, I think that the sliding bar lock has gotten much better since the patent expired. This is a really interesting case of competition versus monopoly. And, you know, like the premise of capitalism is that you can sell things in the market, and you don't have to worry about monopolies because you'll always be able to compete. And when you get a patent, sometimes, it's good for one business, but it's not good for all the other businesses. And it kind of lets this one business sort of rest on its laurels. Now that the patent is expired and lots of people are making sliding bar locks, it's interesting to see that Benchmade's is, I think, probably one of the best on the market. And it's only because they're better than they used to be. And they're better than they used to be because there was genuine competition. So a whole lot of things in this video, a little bit of economics, a little bit of design, some engineering, but I really like the fact that the sliding bar lock has changed and it's gotten better. And this one on this 945 is just absolutely superb. Look for a video overview of this knife coming soon, and look for a review after that.